Welcome, everyone, to Talia Tuesday on the Blueprint Podcast, where we dive deep into the realms of confidence and assertiveness with our co host, Talia Bombola. As a licensed marriage and family therapist and specialist in confidence and assertiveness, Talia brings a wealth of expertise and insights to our discussions. Join us each Tuesday as we explore practical strategies, personal anecdotes, and empowering advice to help you cultivate the confidence and assertiveness you need to thrive in all aspects of life. Get ready to unlock your full potential and build the life you desire with Talia and Jason as your guides. Talia, welcome to your day, Talia Tuesday.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's always good to have you on. I know we haven't been doing these as consistently as we would like, which is very much my problem, not your problem, but
It's good to be aware and conscious of that, and we'll heal it right
you
on
know,
brand with today's theme.
there's just been there's always stuff that's going on. And when you're a one-man band pulling all this stuff together, so you're doing all your own copywriting and video
Mm-hmm.
editing and all this stuff, and then trying to book other people on the podcast,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like it's easy to let things slip. And unfortunately, Talia Tuesday was one of those things that I let slip.
I
So
forgive
I'm
you.
I'm sorry. But
I knew you'd be back.
and you and you have no shortage of other podcasts that you're on, so I didn't
Yeah.
feel too guilty about
No,
it.
I have two of my own. So I missed chatting with you, and it was understandable why you had to break. And I'm glad that we're back.
Yes.
Yeah.
On that note, as 2024 comes to a close, so many people are going to be going on a healing journey in the next couple weeks as we make it through the holidays and then we get to New Year's.
Yeah.
There's always a ton of breakups that happen at or before this time of year or right at New Year's, and that
Yeah.
kind of leads you into January. So now we're in this place of I have to start working out, I have to start eating better, I have to start. And we get to this place where it can create a lot of frustration and confusion for ourselves because we try to do way too many things
Yeah.
at once. When we start the new year, what does it look like, or what should it look like, or what can it look like for us
Mhm.
to kind of dial things back and really get to a place where we focus on one thing in particular instead of trying to do everything all at once?
I think that's a great question to start with because people might interpret the phrase or concept of healing journey as okay, I'm going to get my entire life together starting in 2 weeks. Like, you could start tomorrow. Like, you could start whatever that would be December 18th. Like, you don't have to wait, but a lot of people like to wait till there's like a new month, a new week, a new deadline. There's something to it psychologically, I'm sure. I don't have the word for it, but I'm can almost guarantee that some people like waiting for it to be a fresh start. And the new year does happen to be very significant because, in my opinion, right before we have two major holidays that family dynamics are at an all time high, maybe with tension. It's a highlight of what you have not accomplished over the last year. Maybe you're having chats with family members or you're not going at all because there's estrangement. But when you're having chats with family members of like how much they've grown or cousins you don't get to see that often or other extended family and they're making all these career goals or they have a relationship goal that you'd like to achieve or they just had a child and you've been working towards a parenthood, if you will. And it can really put in perspective sometimes, unfortunately, though, in what you're lacking, if you choose to look at it that way, look how far I am away from all these things I want in life. Or the other reframe is, yes, I may not have all of those other things, but look what I do have. And where is a realistic starting point for you now if you do want to attain or obtain those life goals? So it's a good idea to do an inventory at the end of the year, even if you're not wanting to go on a full multi-plane healing journey in the new year, but being realistic of what does physical health look like for you? What would mental slash spiritual health look like for you? Financial health and then relational health. Those would be the four buckets that I would have people write on like a sheet of paper and then give yourself almost like a grade, like a realistic grade of like, how well do I think I'm doing in those areas? And if you're doing extremely well, or you've made a lot of improvements in certain areas, that's probably not going to be the area you're going to hit your healing journey as hard in the new year. So try not to heal everything in your entire life all at once. Naturally, when you focus on the thing that you have the most struggle with, or you put more resources towards getting out of pain faster in one of the like top areas you're not grading yourself as highly, usually the other areas will start to improve as well. So if my mental health is struggling and I notice my relationships and maybe my financial health are also struggling, but my physical health isn't, that would be an interesting exception, but let's say that's the case, then my best effort would be to continue maybe going to the gym and meal prepping if I have that, start therapy, that would be something for my mental health. And maybe that helps me feel more regulated. So my relationships start to improve. I show up to work on time. I'm not missing hours. I'm getting paid more. Then I start to see my financial health improve. So look at which of the four quadrants you want that improvement in would be my first piece of advice to answer your question, and be realistic with yourself. You can't, not just you, the person listening, any one person can't change every single thing about their life in such rapid succession all at once. Like we have to focus on one thing and then let the chips fall where they may with the other quadrants.
And when I hear you speak about this, what I'm hearing in the background of all of this is habit stacking, which is something
Mm,
James Clear talked about in
mhm,
Atomic Habits,
mhm.
where we want to start small, start with
Yeah.
something, right? So that inventory is really important because you're taking the time to put things out on paper, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. What are the goals or where am I at right now? So you're doing this self assessment, this check in, and you're figuring out realistically where you are now. And then ironing out where do I want to be by the end of 2025? And what are the steps that I would have to take to get to all of these different places that I would like to go? However, you have to start somewhere, and when we get to this place, you can get to a place of analysis paralysis, right? Where you feel like I can't take that first step because it all seems so overwhelming.
Mm,
So we want to dial it back to the day
yeah.
and really come up with a plan for each day that you can do consistently and build the habits up over time. And you do the one thing that you're capable of doing. I always say most of us are pretty dehydrated for the most part. So adding hydration in
True. That'll
is
help a
good.
lot.
It's gonna help a lot in a
Yes.
lot of different ways, and in some ways that you may not think, but
Mhm.
it's an easy habit to start because
Yes.
I'm gonna drink a little bit more water, and each day I'm gonna make that commitment
Mhm.
to myself, and then over a 2-week period or a 30-day period, you realize that you don't even think about it anymore because it just becomes something that you do, it becomes the habit. Now
Yes.
you can stack something else on top of that when you find yourself in that place where you've now forgotten that, "Oh, I gotta track my water," right? You're no
Mhm.
longer tracking these things,
Mhm.
and you put yourself in the position of, "Okay, now I feel a little more confident and capable. I'm gonna add something else into this." And what that is, it's whatever is on your list, whatever you did on the self-assessment.
True. And when you're looking at the changes that you wanna make in your life, the other part of being realistic, if you are single, have been single for quite some time, and are out of the dating pool and, like, self-reported rusty at it, it would be an unrealistic goal within a year to be going from what I just described to married with a kid. Like, just time, literally your time is not gonna be on your side when it comes to that. Now, that doesn't mean you can't meet the one that you could eventually get there with, but the thought about timelines or chronological time can often create, like, a negative inverse pressure, and then the person feels like they're not gonna be able to attain or obtain certain goals by a specific period of time, and then they just quit entirely. That's also not what I recommend people do. Then go back and rework the goal, right? Okay, so then maybe either rework the goal to fit within the timeline if the timeline's super important, and the goal then might be meet a partner, but not be married and have a kid, or be life partner, whatever you wanna call it, and have a kid, or extend the timeline a bit. Keep the same goal, but extend the timeline, and looking at if you had 2 different gas pedals of goal, what is the actual objective, and then what is the timeline in which I'm going to accomplish that? Fine-tuning between those 2. Most everything you have on your list can get accomplished. You just have to be, again, realistic with yourself and patient, because if it's not something as intrinsic as when I used to teach at college, it was the grade. Like, you had an A from the beginning of the semester, it's your job to keep it there. And that's how I would teach my students. Some of them took that and were very motivated by it. And they would take each exam as an example of, I do know this information. I just have to make sure that I study it and keep my A. And for some, they took that and went in a different direction and felt way too much pressure and ended up screwing themselves over because they missed one thing on one exam, assumed they couldn't get their grade back up to whatever it was, and then just sabotage for the rest of the semester. So it's uh, salient advice to not then sabotage yourself if you're noticing, like, why isn't this happening? Grades are something that are pretty much 100% in my control if I have reasonable knowledge of what's going to be on the test, or what am I going to be tested on? Is it exams, journals, what have you? What's the rubric? I can follow it. And then if I have a concern, I could always go to the professor or teacher and be like, hey, why did I get this point off? Oh, you're right. Actually, that should be that way, or, oh, it was because of this thing that you missed. Oh, thanks. It's your internal locus of control. Relationships, financial health, unless you're your own business, which even still entrepreneurs struggle with this because you can't just walk up to people and be like, give me money. You can only have so much growth and success with something that is not just in your internal locus of control. So with dating or relationships, you have a person. You can do all the internal work you want in yourself to prepare yourself for a relationship, and most all of it goes out the window unless you were planning on, oh, I might have to modify this genius master plan I've created for how I want my next relationship to go because there's a real person that I'm going to be enacting on and interacting with that might have a totally other plan. We might have the same goal, right? Let's get married or let's be together forever or let's start a family. Okay, what is the operational definition though? And that's another piece that I added for people who are on this journey. What are your operational definitions of these things that you have goals for? What does financially healthy look like? What does wealth look like to you? What is a good relationship? And being clear with your specific personalized definition so that way you are educated and you can educate others who may share verbally they have the same goal on the surface. But if you're not also having the same operational definition, that's where a lot of conflict can come in, both internal and external, like within the other person you're interacting with. And then again, sabotage can come in because you feel derailed of, I wanted a healthy relationship or a good relationship and they didn't. No, they did. But to them, a good relationship is seeing each other once a week. And for you, it's spending every day together. That just sounds like a mismatch of certain objectives to meet a goal, in my opinion.
Now, have you come up with a key word for 2025 that you want to embody?
Question. Ooh, wow, you sound like my therapist. No, she doesn't do that kind of stuff. She should. No,
She should. No.
she's a different guy. I have a therapist for that. I have an analyst for other deeper seated issues. What would be the? It's a really good question.
I feel like
I'm
that's a
gonna, yeah,
solid coaching question,
it totally is. It
and
totally
it's
is.
one of those ones that I've been encouraging people in my lives
Yeah,
most recently to use the word curiosity for
it's a good
2025.
one. That's a good one.
I think it is for a lot of different reasons. We get inundated with so much information all the time.
Hmm.
And without that level of curiosity, and this comes in all different forms. So it's not just what on the news or what social media. It's also the people that are in your life and the relationships that you have. And this can be romantic, it can be familial, it can be with your coworkers. But we're always in this place of having some sort of relationship, and we're in this place of co-creating. But the thing that I've noticed is that nobody's really asking other people about their experience. Who are you, and what are you all
Oh
about,
no, of course not. It's all
and
about
what
me.
yeah, and what makes you tick. It seems like we're always trying to get something from the other person, the
Hmm.
situation, the circumstances, and we're not taking enough time to really zoom out, step back, and observe the other person that's in front of us as their own sovereign being, and to actually be curious enough to figure out what makes you tick, what's going on up there, what's important to you, and to get really curious about all of these different areas in your life, and to let that be what leads you in 2025. And I think when you finally start to embody that word, you're going to feel, like I said earlier, you're going to feel more confident, competent, and capable in your own life through that process. And you're going to feel a little bit more satisfied with the types of relationships that you're having.
Yeah, I would add like a sub word to be discerning also. And
Yeah.
I think curiosity without discernment can have its own struggles.
Yeah.
So be discerning of what you're curious about. And it's the kind of the bright eyed and bushy tailed, wow, I never knew that, but don't take everything at face value. That's also me being jaded.
Yeah. We're not talking
Think
about
about.
anxious
No,
curiosity.
no, no.
What are you thinking? You really
Hey, what are you talking about? What are you thinking about?
you're
Yeah.
really you got really quiet. What are you
Yeah, that's
thinking?
being
What's
intrusive.
wrong? Yeah.
Being curious of, "Huh, I wonder why it is the way that it is." Yeah, I think that's and then
This is
discerning what
upbeat,
information you're being
loving,
fed.
kind.
Yes, your
Yeah.
intention, yeah, the vibe is different. I think my word would be receptive, mainly because the first year of motherhood is, like, literally giving to make sure that they survive. Not that it's, like, now stark shift, like, "You got 1 year kid, now it's all about mom again," but, like, I think being in a more receptive and, to your point, curious, like receptive role and looking at not what the world can do for me, but what can I do to reaffirm that I already have inherent worth and value and that I don't have to prove that or behave in a certain way with others or only give in order to receive. It's like, where can I receive or where can I see that the universe or my one of my mentors calls it Gus, the God, universe, spirit, whoever you believe in. Like, where can I see that Gus is already working in my life? And that mantra, I forget what movie it's from, but it gives me the vibes of Rob Lowe on Parks and Rec, where he's just like super positive all the time, but like the vibe of just everything goes my way. Of course, this would happen this way, and not seeing yourself in the victim position. And I think that's another actual, really key part of going on a self development journey and becoming more conscious and becoming more aware of what is the blueprint you were given subconsciously. If you look at any of Bruce Lipton's work, like from 0 to 7, that's all the blueprinting. That's all like the theta waves. That's who you're going to be operating on for pretty much the rest of your adult life until you become more conscious and aware and make those changes of your subconscious beliefs. Where are you painting yourself to be the victim? And I talked about this with my analyst this morning, actually. If before I knew that my ex was cheating on me, I didn't know he was cheating on me. As soon as I found out that he was cheating on me, I stopped participating in the relationship because I don't want to be in a relationship where that's happening. Now, I could have chosen, all right, let's do this shit again and give it another try after all this other stuff, but I didn't want to. And if I had and he had kept cheating, that's my fault. That's not his fault. Yes, he's doing the behavior, but I was not conscious to it. Once I consciously knew that, that would have been a conscious choice to keep putting myself and perpetuating that pattern. And then I also couldn't have realistically kept blaming him. You're choosing to stay, right? And that's not to say victim blaming. Like, it's hard to leave an unhealthy relationship. Trust me, I'm painfully aware of it. And at a certain point, the agency, the ownership, the autonomy and independence, like, it's your life. You only get one shot at this, as far as I know, as far as everyone I've talked to in all my interviews. Like, we got one go at this. You may as well make it count. Don't continue to put yourself in a position where you feel like a victim or you victimize yourself in your self development journey. You're going to have to cut people off. You're not going to have the same relationships. Do not expect your life in a good way to look like it does now. It's, as I put on my coaching application, a transformative and sometimes draining overhaul of your life. You need to accept the fact that your relationships ideally are not going to look the exact same. And the same thing, your financial health ideally would get better, but it's not going to look the exact same. Physical health should get better. It's not going to be the exact same life that you have now. And that does start with taking radical accountability and ownership. Like, where are you putting yourself in the recipient of the victim position, or like others doing to you with no accountability? You have agency and you have choice in your life.
Yeah, the problem is we don't always recognize that we have agency
Right.
or choice. It's really hard to come to that level of awareness and understanding, which is why we talk about the categories in the way that we do. For me, it's physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I don't often talk about the financial aspect because if you're doing things physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, more often than not, as you create that habit of being in each of those different areas, so you're creating daily habits that align physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually with where you want to go in your life. There's and in that, as you begin to elevate yourself in new and different ways, you start trusting yourself a little bit more. In that process, people start seeing you differently. It's why you hear me talk a lot about the conditions of relationships. We actually create those conditions to
Totally.
exist over and over again. And until you decide that you want to change, you're going to create those same conditions everywhere you go because no
Mhm.
matter where you go,
There you are.
there you are.
Yeah.
And so we get into this place where when you start to feel better about yourself, those old relationships that you've had for your entire life, it's not that they're bad relationships, but they'll even come back to you and say, you know what, you're different. You've changed. Yeah, I have. And there's a point to that. Thank you for noticing. I think that's awesome. High five. Good job. But they often don't take it that way because
Mhm.
now you'll start hearing in return, "Oh, you just think you're better than everybody else." And it's like,
Mhm.
"Whoa, hold up. Like, where's that coming from? I did things for myself to better my life, to change my circumstances, to do something new and different so that in the long term of however long I have on this planet, that I get to live a slightly better life as the years go on." That's the whole intent. I want to
Mhm.
become a better and more capable person, but now you're getting hit with this resistance. And it's in that resistance that you have to look at the other person, get a little bit curious. Where is this coming from? Why are they acting that way? And they might see what you're doing as a threat to them because now they have to see you differently. They have to think
Mhm.
about you differently. You're taking away
Mhm.
the person that they loved. I think it was
Mhm.
Jen Sincero that talked about that in her book, that you're
Mhm.
literally getting rid of the person that they fell in
They're
love
used
with.
to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that they're used to. So now that file that's in their brain, they have to figure out what to do with that.
Update.
They either have to update it or completely toss it out. And for a lot of people, they don't know how to update it or they're unwilling to update it because I know who you are. I know what you're
Mhm.
capable of, and that's who you're always going to be to me. And it can seem very unfair from your perspective because you're just trying to do what you know is right for you in the long term. You would think that people would want to support that, but
No,
not every.
because everybody thinks they know what's right. As parents are the most guilty of this.
Yeah.
I look after all I've done for you. I know you best. No, you don't. When's the last time you were actually curious? And this goes like both directions. That to your point earlier of where does that come from? It comes from a judgment that if the other, it's like the person's shadow is showing when they say that, of you just think you're better than everybody else. That is a window into that if they did the behaviors you did, that they're accusing you of being better than everybody else for doing, that's why they would do that. If they went and changed their life, it would be because they believed they were better than everybody else. So then they're projecting or introjecting into you their own judgment. And that's where you have to catch it and be like, wow, how sad for you. Again, the cheating thing, it's I happen to be the collateral damage, if you will, in that. But that says a lot more about how he treated himself and how he viewed himself and his own worth than it does about me. It could happen to anyone. And the reframe of it is, wow, how sad for him. That is something that he is going through, and I don't need to participate in it. I'm not going to run in and rescue and fix and save and prove and convince and all this other stuff. And that's often what happens when, like you're saying and detailing, the person who makes the change shares, and the person goes, you've changed so much. After all I've done for you, we're not as close anymore. I miss when we were close. What they're describing sometimes as close is actually enmeshed and no boundaries and codependent and people pleasing. It's not healthy, whether, and that's not about a judgment necessarily, but they're describing, wow, you've changed so much. I don't know how to get close to you anymore. I don't know what our relationship's going to look like if we're even going to have one. Gosh, I'm going to have to do so much work to update my view of you, or I already did so much work to this point. I'm tired. I don't want to update it. There's a lot more. And again, to like even your earlier point, there's a lot more that goes into what is going on when we start to consider other people. This is not to say consider how your change would affect others and don't change. It's this change is really important to me. I'm going to do it and then I'll figure out how it impacts others as I go. But don't forego making the change and doing the healing journey that we're talking about, how to in the beginning of this episode. Don't forego doing that because you think other people might not like you or your relationships might not survive. Guess what? They won't. And I say the same things to my couples because I'm lovingly mean in my couples therapy. I'm like, you might not end up together at the end of this. They're like, what? What kind of couples therapy is this? I was like, I'm just being realistic. I have no clue what we're about to get into. I know what's on your papers, on your intake, but we haven't gone into your subconscious yet. I don't know who married whose parent in the imago workup of this. I don't know what projections we're getting into or who you remind each other of yet. I can't guarantee you will stay together. You guys also can't guarantee that. If you want to choose to stay together, that is a choice available to you. I'm just saying you may not want to choose that by the end of this. And we've talked about this in other episodes. Sometimes when couples come in and they have a severely codependent person and somebody who's receiving kind of that enabling of the behavior, whether that's substance use, not getting a job, some other victimization. At the end of it, if they're doing proper work and they're going into their own individual therapy, they might look at each other and be like, yeah, that was a fun run, but we actually can't, the new healed versions of ourselves don't even want to be together because we're not attracted to each other. We were attracted to each other in our dis-ease or our unhealth far more than we were in being like fully attuned, awakened, enlightened, whatever wording you want to use. And that's an okay thing. If you're doing the work correctly and really putting yourself to the task of, I want to heal and I want to take an inventory of my life, it not only will some of your relationships and friendships end, it's for the better. You wouldn't be continuing to grow or get to fully manifest and realize all that you are in life if you stay with certain partners who are especially uncommitted to doing the self work, self growth journey, or friends who are like, whatever with all your therapy, woo woo shit. I'm just going to stay here and do that. Okay, have fun people pleasing the rest of your life. I'm leaving that in the past. I'm too important. And this is not narcissistically. It's my one life that I get to live, just like everybody else has the one shot, is more important than me staying stuck to make you, this one person, happy. I'm not going to live your life. I'm going to live my life. And if you'd like to join me, you're welcome to. But if that's the collateral damage for me to be my real self, I'll take it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times they see the work that you did on the peripheral
Yes.
and they recognize that, okay, if I did what they did, then I could have what they have, or I could be doing what they're doing, or I might feel the way they feel.
Mhm,
But for them in that moment, it actually seems so impossible for them to maybe even get started or try. And so it's actually easier to write off the relationship than it
mhm,
is to ask, how did you do that? And how can I start?
mhm, mhm. Curiosity, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good word. Good ethos, mantra. I like it.
So, how does becoming more conscious of our thoughts and behaviors change the way we experience healing?
I think it starts us on if you look at the stages of change model, which is used for conscious change that you are mostly in control of. It's not all change happens by the way the model details because of the fact that we know like life happens to us sometimes and we're like, "Oh, why did that I didn't ask for this change or I didn't ask for this to be like if you're renting like I rent an office and if one day the building was like, "Sorry, we're closing down." That's not conscious change. I'm not going out and looking for a new space by my own doing, but inadvertently I would have to do that because change was enacted upon me. So, when you're looking at how does becoming more conscious and aware of your own thoughts and behaviors put you on your own healing journey, it moves you from pre-contemplation, which is I have no clue this is even a problem, to contemplation, this is probably a problem. I give the smoking cigarettes example. If I'm smoking a pack a day, that's not healthy. Like just it's just not. There's no argument that I've ever heard that this is very good for your health. It's not. Pre-contemplation, I think that there's no problem with what I'm doing. Pack might be a lot. The pack a day might be a lot. That's contemplation. And then preparation is okay, I know a pack a day is a lot. I need to make changes of how I'm going to stop that, cut that down, whether go cold turkey, like I'm not never going to smoke again, or I'm just going to reduce it to a cigarette a day. Then when you're moving from preparation to action, the different kinds of thoughts and behaviors you are engaging in start to shift. When you're acting on, I am going to be smoking less than one pack a day, or I'm only going to smoke a cigarette a day, to go from whatever that would be 140 math rough a week to one, it might not happen in a week, again, unless you go cold turkey. And that wouldn't be the recommendation if you want this to be a long lasting, sustained change. Scaling it back and getting a lot of time under your belt with it being realistic that you can achieve it. Then you move into maintenance. You go from action, which I'm reducing the intake to maintenance. Now I only whatever it is smoke one a day or I don't smoke at all. In some models, relapse is part of recovery. But I gave this example in a different podcast recently that I think was helpful, so I'll give it here too. If I am in full remission, if I'm not smoking at all, but then I go on this Europe trip and I see somebody smoking and it takes me back to all the nostalgia and I have one cigarette while I'm standing outside this pub and then I come back to America and I have no more and I never bought it, technically I relapsed, but also like I maintained the sobriety from it because I was more conscious of why I was doing it that time. I wasn't just walking up mindlessly and going, "Oh, that smells good. I want to do that." If you are bringing more conscientiousness into why you did it, then there's less shame or there's less guilt emotionally around if you choose to relapse or if you inadvertently relapse. And then you don't have to move right back to the beginning of the stages of change. You move back into, okay, got to prepare to change that again. Now I've changed it. Now I'm maintaining it again. So you're able to move through the change faster. So I like, because it's conscious change and solution focused, I like using the stages of change model. That's what I teach in my coaching program and to my coaching and therapy clients, that you have to become more consciously aware of if all of your relationships have failed, who's the common denominator? You. Or if all your relationships are successful, who's the common denominator? You still have to take a look inward and go, what am I doing to contribute to either the rise or demise of whatever I'm trying to change in my life and taking that accountability. Oh, I pick people who reinforce the belief that I'm unlovable. If you change the belief that you're unlovable, you'll start to see the people that you pick change and they will reinforce the new belief that you've replaced about yourself, which is you have inherent worth and value as you are. The type of people you'll date will mirror that rather than that previous belief. So it's just as much conscious change external work, infrastructure wise, as it is those internal rewiring those subconscious beliefs and like how you have your mission, vision, and values for your relationships that you talk about. My whole thing is like rewiring those subconscious beliefs because you can make all the conscious change you want and go to all the therapy. If you don't change it on that deep, intellectual, insightful, intuitive base level and rewire them, it doesn't matter. You'll just be a very self aware, unchanged person. And that's not what most people want. Is self awareness means nothing if you don't do anything with it. You just sound like you're pontificating all the time. And that's where we get all these gurus who just regurgitate every book and podcast they've ever read, but their life's in shambles. They should not be giving advice. And again, not to say you can't have your own stuff going on while you help others, but that's most It's best done when you've had either your own extensive personal therapy or you're professionally trained to be making change for others and gone to grad school for it. Like you've learned boundaries around it, if you will.
Yeah, I saw a video just before we hopped on. I forget the
Mhm.
guy's name, but he's one of those spiritual people that you'll find on Instagram, and he's such an interesting dude. But he was talking about content creation in 2025 and what that's actually going to look like. And like you're saying, it looks like embodiment.
Yep.
So no more of this hooks to draw people in and get the views
Yeah.
and all of that. Instead, it's a level of authenticity. There's still going to be a hook, but it's not going to be clickbait. It's going to be, hey, this is what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
You should join me, and then
Mhm.
let's have this conversation. And I'm going to dole out a bunch of information for you, and let's start some dialogue. And maybe you drop some questions in here, and we'll keep it going in the comment
Yeah.
section. And then I might make more content off of
Based on
that
that.
because man, that's some really good stuff, and it's what people are actually going through
Wanting.
and and what they're actually wanting. And so then we can get to this place where I try not to use healing that much, but I feel like it's more adapting because we live in a complex adaptive system, and you have to get to this place in your mind and in your body that you recognize that the world is this massively challenging place to include your own inner world, and you have to learn how to navigate all of these things. And it just takes time. You have to get to know yourself, like I
Mhm.
said, in all those different areas, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. But we like to tell ourselves that we're broken. And
Mhm.
in that brokenness, now I have to shift into healing. And it's no, you have to shift into adapting because we're adapting to things that may or may not have occurred in the past. They may be real or imagined, but to you it's real in this moment, and you're trying to navigate these things and move away from it, and it can be a struggle, it can be painful, it can be frustrating, it can be difficult, it can be all the things. But when you learn to adapt, and we just use that language instead of I'm broken, you feel once again, it's about becoming more capable, competent, and confident in who you are and what you're actually capable of doing for yourself. And in that, other people receive you in a completely different way. Aaron Dowdy always says this: people feel how you feel about you. So when you feel
Mhm.
differently about you, and this is what you just said a few minutes ago, when you feel differently about you and you're putting that energy out into the world, people are going to receive that whether they want to or not. And it's going to
Mhm.
make them feel a certain way, but they're also going to give that back to you. And you're going to feel that from people because you're going to realize that there are more people out in the real world, not just on social media, that are ready to receive that energy that you have. So show up as your most authentic version of you and let people have that experience of who you are.
Yeah. I think my final words of wisdom, it got brought up for me while you were describing the difference of using even just the nomenclature of broken and healing versus I went through some shit and I'm adapting. It's whack. Life is whack a mole. You're always going to be going through some shit. And just when you heal or adapt from one thing, there's going to be another. That's the nature of life. If you learn to accept that's the nature of life, even the way that you describe, whether it's to your therapist or to others, your own healing, self development, recovery journey, whatever journey you're on, to use the most ethereal, colloquial language for it. If you think of yourself as broken and having to heal mentally, you're almost stuck at that point that you feel broken. Whatever it is where you're going back to, this is what broke me and this is why I'm this gross, disgusting, shame, whatever person, you're thinking of it from like that moment to the future, and it's gonna be a feeling like a reach to get to for you to feel like you're actually where you're at. So let's say now you're 30, the 5-year-old version of you that will always live inside of you, yes, that happened to them. It didn't happen to 30-year-old you. 30-year-old you can go back and do some inner child work and reparenting and looking at, we are not that same broken 5-year-old, although I honor a part of us might feel this push to regress back to it, it's not the case. You have agency, you are a different person, and it is disgusting when that happens to people, and the victimization starts from childhood, and it doesn't start in adulthood, that it's terrible that happened, and to be able to learn, I can adapt from that. I don't have to view even if others do, I don't have to view myself as that broken, sad, whatever label you're giving that version of yourself that victimization happened to, that is a separate version of your adult self or your authentic self. So learning to separate like broken and healing versus these things are happening to me and I'm adapting from them and because of them, and I can move and grow forward. I won't stay stuck in viewing myself as broken. Again, you're not responsible for how other people view you. Other people could have that about you as a narrative. That doesn't mean you have to have that view about you as a narrative. You have to redefine your life. Carl Jung loosely said, as we close, The first 25 years of your life is everybody else telling you who to be and you doing it. And then the next 25 or back half, whatever long you live past that frontal lobe development ish, is you figuring out who you really are and not teaching others, meaning you're forcing them to see you that way, but you educating others of that was not me. That was what you expected of me. Here's who I really am. And then allowing other people to get to know your authentic self. And I think that's what we need to keep in mind on this healing journey. The goal is for you to discover your authentic self so that you can allow others to discover it. It's not for other people, it's for you. It's okay to be selfish and want to figure out who you are separate from who other people told you were.
And I would add into that real quickly that it becomes about creating the capacity, literally the capacity within yourself for those things to exist. So you're creating that container that,
And
yeah,
space.
it's a part of me, but it's not all of me.
Mhm,
And with that energy that you create, you
mhm.
can now go out into the world as the adult integrated version of yourself,
Yes.
even though those things still exist within you.
Yes.
Talia, thank you so much for being here today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for tuning into today's episode of Talia Tuesday on the Blueprint Podcast with Talia Bombola. Remember, building confidence, self-love, and assertiveness is a journey, and each step you take brings you closer to your goals. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more insightful conversations and practical tips to support your personal growth, and head over to my Stand store to sign up for the 21-day self-love challenge. On sale now, and you can also drop a question for Talia and I for the podcast. Until next time, keep embracing your strengths, asserting your boundaries, and living authentically. Take care, and we'll see you next Tuesday on the Blueprint Podcast.